The forgotten radio station. In the dusty plains of New Mexico, trucker Mike Johnson found himself lost on a desolate stretch of highway. His GPS had failed hours ago, and the setting sun cast an eerie orange glow across the barren landscape. As night fell, static crackled through his radio, breaking the oppressive silence. Suddenly, a clear voice cut through the white noise. "You're listening to KDEF, the voice of the desert. It's 9:15 p.m., and we've got a special request coming up next." Mike's brow furrowed. He knew every station along this route, but he'd never heard of KDEF. As an old country song began to play, he shrugged it off, grateful for the company. The song ended, and the DJ's voice returned. That was Lonesome Road by Hank Williams. "Now we've got a caller on the line. Go ahead, you're on the air." A trembling voice spoke. "Please, if anyone can hear me, I need help. I'm trapped. I don't know where I am. There's something out here in the dark." Mike's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The caller's terror felt palpable. The DJ's tone remained unervingly cheerful. "Well, folks, sounds like we've got ourselves a real-life horror story unfolding. Let's take another caller." Another voice, this one angry. "You can't help her. No one can. We're all trapped here." As more callers joined in, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear and desperation, Mike realized with growing horror that he recognized some of them. A woman who had gone missing from a nearby town last month. A hiker who'd vanished in the desert 2 summers ago. He reached to change the station, but every frequency now played KDEF. The voices grew louder, more insistent. They knew his name. They could see his truck. Mike's foot pressed harder on the accelerator, but the speedometer didn't budge. The radio crackled again, and a new voice spoke, his own, tinged with panic. "Please, if anyone can hear me, I need help. I'm trapped." The headlights flickered and died, plunging Mike into darkness. In the distance, a single light blinked on, the neon sign of a radio station, beckoning him home. The siren's lament. The coastal town of Blackwater Cove had always been shrouded in mystery, but when fisherman Tom Harding pulled a strange object from his nets, he knew something was terribly wrong. It was a conch shell, larger than any he'd ever seen, with an iridescent sheen that seemed to shift in the sunlight. As Tom examined the shell, a haunting melody drifted from its spiraling chambers. The song was beautiful, yet filled him with an inexplicable dread. He tried to throw it back, but found he couldn't let go. That night, the town was awakened by an otherworldly wail. Residents rushed to their windows to see a thick fog rolling in from the sea, carrying with it the scent of salt and decay. In the mist, shadowy figures moved with inhuman grace. The local sheriff, Ellen Cooper, was overwhelmed with calls. People reported loved ones wandering into the fog, drawn by an irresistible song. Those who tried to stop them found their limbs growing heavy, their minds clouded by the hypnotic melody. Tom's wife, Anna, found him in their bedroom, the conch shell pressed to his ear. His eyes were glassy, his skin pale and clammy. As she reached for him, he turned to her with a beatific smile. "Can't you hear it, Anna? They're calling us home." Before she could react, Tom was out the door, stumbling towards the beach. Anna chased after him, fighting against the growing lethargy in her limbs. The fog parted momentarily, revealing a horrifying sight. Dozens of townsfolk wading into the churning waves, where pale, elongated figures waited with outstretched arms. Sheriff Cooper arrived on the scene, her deputy by her side. They watched helplessly as their friends and neighbors disappeared beneath the waves. The deputy raised his gun, but Cooper stopped him. "Bullets won't work on them," she said, her voice hollow. "This has happened before." She led Anna to the old lighthouse, where ancient tomes spoke of a cyclic invasion. Every 100 years, the sea creatures returned, using their siren song to lure humans into the depths. The only way to break the spell was to destroy the source, the conch shell that Tom had found. But as dawn broke and the fog receded, they realized it was too late. The beach was littered with empty shells, each one singing its own mournful tune. In the distance, beneath the waves, new voices joined the chorus, the voices of Blackwater Cove. Anna clutched Tom's abandoned shell, tears streaming down her face. The song pulsed through her, a promise of reunion. She took a step toward the water, then another. Behind her, Sheriff Cooper's warnings faded into the all-consuming melody of the sea. The hungry earth. Dr. Evelyn Reeves had always been fascinated by the natural world, but her latest discovery in the Amazon rainforest defied all scientific explanation. It started with a series of mysterious disappearances, local tribespeople vanishing without a trace. The only clue, patches of unusually lush vegetation where they were last seen. Evelyn's research team set up camp near one of these areas, determined to uncover the truth. Their first night, they were awakened by agonized screams. They found their guide, Marcus, half submerged in the ground, tendrils of plants wrapping around his limbs, pulling him deeper. As they struggled to free him, Evelyn noticed the plants pulsing with an eerie bioluminescence. Marcus's skin began to mottle and decay wherever the vegetation touched him. By the time they extracted him, he was barely conscious, his body covered in necrotic lesions. Over the next few days, more incidents occurred. Equipment sank into suddenly soft earth. Team members reported feeling dizzy and disoriented, as if the air itself was drugging them. Plants seemed to reach for them, roots shifting beneath their feet. Evelyn's soil samples revealed something unprecedented. The entire ecosystem was behaving as a single, sentient organism. The plants, the fungi, even microscopic bacteria, all working in concert, driven by an insatiable hunger. As they tried to radio for evacuation, a violent storm hit. Lightning struck their communication equipment, leaving them stranded. The rain seemed to energize the forest. Vines crept faster, flowers bloomed and released intoxicating spores. The ground became treacherous quicksand. The team fled, abandoning their camp. But the forest was hurting them, closing off escape routes, leading them deeper into its heart. One by one, Evelyn watched her colleagues succumb, some pulled into the earth, others cocooned by rapidly growing vines, their bodies dissolving to feed the insatiable flora. Evelyn found herself alone, trapped in a small clearing. The plants formed a living wall around her, swaying hypnotically. She felt her mind slipping, the boundaries between herself and the forest blurring. As tendrils began to caress her skin, Evelyn made a terrifying realization. This wasn't just a hunting ground, it was an incubator. The forest wasn't just consuming them, it was assimilating them, using human consciousness to evolve into something new and terrifying. With her last moment of clarity, Evelyn understood the true horror of her situation. She wouldn't die here. She would become part of this monstrous organism, her mind trapped forever in a prison of roots and leaves, forced to lure more victims into the hungry embrace of the forest. As the vegetation enveloped her, Evelyn's scream was cut short, replaced by the rustle of newly sprouted leaves. The lonely lighthouse. On a remote island off the coast of Maine, lighthouse keeper Jack Holloway embraced solitude. His only company, the rhythmic flash of the beacon and the ceaseless crash of waves against jagged rocks. That is, until the night the foghorn went silent. Jack trudged through the mist to investigate. The ancient mechanism had finally given out. As he worked to repair it, a sound drifted through the fog, a mournful, inhuman wail. He dismissed it as the wind, but the cries grew closer, more insistent. Shapes moved in the mist, pale, elongated figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Jack retreated to the lighthouse, heart pounding. The next morning, he radioed the mainland for assistance. Static was his only reply. As days passed, Jack's unease grew. The fog never lifted, and the shapes in the mist became bolder, pressing against the windows at night, leaving strange, phosphorescent streaks on the glass. One evening, a ship's distress signal pierced the gloom. Jack raced to light the foghorn's emergency fuel, but as the blast echoed across the water, the wailing creatures fell silent. Then, a new sound, splintering wood and screaming metal as the ship ran aground. Jack sprinted to the shore, desperate to help. But the wreckage he found was impossibly old, covered in barnacles and sea growth. And there, amidst the ruins, stood a man in the uniform of a 19th-century lighthouse keeper, his flesh pale and bloated. "You shouldn't have called them," the figure rasped, gesturing to the shapes emerging from the sea. "Now they know you're here." Jack fled back to the lighthouse, barricading himself inside. But the barriers couldn't keep out the voices, the pleas of long-dead sailors, the laments of forgotten lighthouse keepers. They whispered of an ancient pact, a deal struck with creatures from the deep. The lighthouse was meant to stay dark, they said. Its light didn't save lives. It lured souls for the hungry things in the mist. As weeks blurred into months, Jack's grip on reality slipped. He smashed the beacon, plunging the island into darkness. But it was too late. The creatures had grown strong on the souls he'd unwittingly fed them. On the last night, as tendrils of mist seeped through every crack, Jack made his way to the top of the tower. The sea of fog below teemed with ghostly shapes. All turned toward him expectantly. He understood now. This was his penance, his eternity. As he stepped off the platform into the waiting arms of the mist, Jack joined the chorus of endless, mournful wails, a warning to those who might one day relight the beacon, and a lament for those already lost to the hungry dark.